applause not necessary. Good evening, everyone. I am Carrie Weber, and I'm the Executive Director of the Fairfield University Art Museum, and it's my great pleasure to welcome you all here this evening. Thank you so much for coming out for the opening tonight of on Gorta Mór, Selections from Ireland's Great Hunger Museum. So the Ireland's Great Hunger Museum at Quinnipiac University was closed in 2020 as a result of the pandemic, but soon after, Quinnipiac University trustees voted to move this historic collection to the town of Fairfield under the care of Ireland's Great Hunger Museum of Fairfield, which they had chosen as the future stewards of the collection. This new iteration of the museum hopes to open in Fairfield in 2026 or 27 at 636 Old Post Road. And in the meantime, we are so very pleased to be able to bring a selection of these works out of storage to share with you all tonight and all the way through mid-August. So bring your friends back to see them. This remarkable collection investigates the Irish famine of 1845 to 1852 and its impact through art by some of the most important Irish and Irish-American artists of the past 170 years. The artworks you'll see in the museum's Walsh gallery are in a variety of media, including paintings, sculpture, watercolor, and pastel, ranging from Romanticism to postmodernism. These artworks serve as a reminder of the many ways in which the famine affected Ireland in both the short and the long term. The exhibition takes its name from the Irish Gaelic phrase for the Great Hunger, on Gorta Mór. We're pleased to have William Abbott, Associate Professor of History, as our opening night speaker this evening to enhance our understanding of the Great Hunger in preparation for viewing the exhibition. Although as I was standing in the lobby, I heard a lot of people sort of peeking in going, oh, my favorite one is in there. So I think a lot of people are quite familiar with this collection, have visited it in Hampden, and I think a lot of you may also be familiar with the Great Hunger, but hopefully you will learn something this evening, and then you'll get to see some of your favorites in the galleries. We'd like to thank, just a few notes. I'm gonna tell you a few more housekeeping remarks, a few upcoming events. I'm gonna bring out our university provost to welcome you, and then we will get to the main event. I wanna thank Ryan Mahoney for his expertise in helping us to create this exhibition at Fairfield, and I wanna say how grateful we are to the team at Ireland's Great Hunger Museum of Fairfield, especially John Foley, Loretta O'Leary, Dorothea Brennan, and Kendra Williamson for their enthusiastic support of this effort. Thanks as always go to the exceptional museum team here for their hard work in bringing this exhibition and its associated programming to life. Michelle DiMarzo, Curator of Education and Academic Engagement, Megan Pacwa, our tireless museum registrar, Heather Coleman, museum assistant, and Elizabeth Viano, museum educator. I have to highlight our brand new Bloomberg Connects app and guide. It just debuted this past week, and this exhibition is our very first to be on the app. So the very first audio guide, et cetera, to be there. So please check that out. Our museum intern is going to be in the lobby to help show you how to use it if you're not familiar with the Bloomberg app. But we are really excited to have joined over 800 arts and culture organizations worldwide on the Bloomberg app, and this exhibition is there for people from all over the world to see. So it's very exciting, and it allows us to make our exhibitions even more accessible than they already were to people everywhere. So very exciting. I do want to highlight the very next exhibition-related program, which is happening next week, next Tuesday. Niamh O'Connor, who was the founding curator of this fantastic collection, is coming over from Dublin at expense on our part to do a talk. So I hope you will all come back and hear her speak about the history of the collection. It's Tuesday at 6 o'clock, not in this exact space, but someplace nearby. which you can find on the Bloomberg app. Now it is my great pleasure to welcome the University Provost, Christine Siegel, to say a few words to you.
Thank you, Carrie, and good evening. On behalf of President Nemec and the whole of our leadership team, it is my honor to welcome you to Fairfield University for tonight's program. Thank you all for coming to join in what I sometimes like to call the unending conversation. At the heart of Fairfield University's educational mission is an ongoing dialogue between scholars and students, teachers and learners of all types, across generations, across time, and across locations. According to the Catholic intellectual tradition, this dialogue persists and is fueled by human curiosity that drives us to ask the enduring questions. What is the meaning of life? What is happiness? Does God exist? And if so, why is there unhappiness and suffering in the world? In the face of suffering, what does it mean to be human? And what do we as humans owe to each other? What are the rights and responsibilities of humans in a just society? What is just? And how do we know? Here at Fairfield University, our art museum, including our Bellarmine Hall and Walsh galleries, is an essential voice in this conversation and critical component of our educational mission. According to James Schneider, a senior fellow at the Harvard Kennedy School, quote, "Museums are custodians of culture, preserving works of art and artifacts of life from different time periods and contextualizing them with ever-changing perspectives. Each museum has the potential to place the material heritage of individual cultures into a broader context, producing powerfully illustrative stories of communal connection with special meaning in their own time, as well as for us today." Thus, a museum, as Schneider describes it, and indeed our Fairfield University Art Museum, helps to host the unending human conversation that is at the core of our educational mission. And beginning this evening, we are so pleased to be hosting an exhibition of special works from Ireland's Great Hunger Museum of Fairfield that will be on display until mid-August. I would like to thank the team at the Great Hunger Museum and their colleagues at Quinnipiac University for collaborating with our Fairfield University Art Museum on this project and for lending us these artworks that we will have here for many months. Thank you to members of the Gaelic American Club of Fairfield and the board members of Ireland's Great Hunger Museum for joining us this evening, and for all you have done to ensure a permanent home for the museum in downtown Fairfield. I'd like to give a shout out to students in the audience, students from our Irish student group, students from the Irish Studies program, as well as to faculty from our Irish Studies program, and a special shout out to all Irish American students, faculty, staff, and guests here tonight. I'd also like to acknowledge Carrie Weber, the Frank and Clara Meditz Executive Director, and our team here in the Fairfield University Art Museum for their work in helping to bring this exhibit to campus. I am so pleased that our students, those in the Irish Studies program and in other degree programs across campus, as well as the general public, will be able to view these important works that, as you just heard from Carrie, have been in storage for the past 5 years. And lastly, I'd like to thank Professor William Abbott for his commitment to our Irish Studies program and for serving as the faculty liaison for this important museum exhibit. Thank you, Bill, for your contributions to our university's mission, and especially for leading us in conversation tonight. And now, without further ado, I'm going to turn the podium back over to Carrie, who will formally introduce Bill. Thank you.
Okay, two final quick announcements. You might have seen the red tablecloth in the lobby as you came in. Theater Fairfield is presenting the play Steel Magnolias tonight at 7:30 and all weekend. If you see a lot of art tonight, have a glass of wine, and you're like, let's go to a play. They have tickets available. So 7:30 curtain, you want to just stay out a little bit longer, that is an option. There are seats available, or you could buy some tickets for later in the weekend. And we have an incredibly beautiful exhibition up in the Bellarmine Hall galleries called Dawn and Dusk, Tonalism, Painting in Connecticut Tonalism. It's been up for months and I've already forgotten the title. But it is just a gorgeous painting of exhibition of paintings of Connecticut, and it is only here until Saturday. It's we're going to be so sad to see it go. It's open till 8 o'clock tonight, so if you get tired of the paintings in the Walsh Gallery and you feel like seeing some more, you can head up there, or you can come back. You have till Saturday to see it, and then it will be gone. So I recommend that also. And then lastly, our final exhibition of the academic year opens on May 1st. It is the first American solo museum exhibition of the Austrian-born photographer Trude Fleischmann. It's going to be a really beautiful show, also up in Bellarmine Hall. So we would love to welcome you back for that on May 1st. Without further ado, I am now going to introduce Bill Abbott. Dr. William Abbott is an associate professor of history who has taught at Fairfield University since 1985. His teaching specialties are British history, Irish history, Western civilization, and war in Western history. His research specialties are 17th century English ecclesiastical history and the Victorian era animal rights movement, and he has published a number of scholarly articles in these fields. He has served as chair of the Fairfield University History Department and as co-director of Fairfield's Irish Studies program. We are grateful to have him serving as the faculty liaison for this exhibition and for writing the catalog essay about the Great Hunger. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Abbott.
Thank you, Carrie. Between 1845 and 1852, over 1 million Irish people, over 12% of the entire Irish population, died of starvation or starvation-related diseases. Another million emigrated either to Britain or across the Atlantic. Try to imagine our nation losing 24% of its population over the course of only 6 years. That actually would come to 82 million people, 41 million dead, 41 million leaving. Imagine this and you have some idea of what Ireland went through during these years of the Great Hunger. The question is why? The answers are to be found in a web of interacting political, religious, social, cultural, biological conditions. First answer is biological. A blight from America wiped out the potato crop in Ireland during these 3 or 4 successive years, and indeed in a number of other European countries which did not lose millions of their citizens. Unlike those citizens, however, over a quarter of the entire Irish population depended on the potato as their main and often their only source of food. The potato is a nutritious vegetable. It can be grown in large amounts on small plots of land. The Irish people who starved when the potatoes rotted were generally possessed of only tiny plots of land. But possessed is not accurate. These Irish people did not own. They rented these plots from landlords, often without a written lease, which meant that they had no legal recourse if the landlord chose to evict them. Well, how did this system of landlords and tenants come about? Why didn't these 2 million Irish grow other crops? A century before Ireland's Great Hunger, England had seen an agricultural revolution in which crop rotation, new types of fertilizer, other innovations had banished famine from England for good. Why was there no similar agricultural revolution in Ireland? The answer begins with the English conquest of Ireland back in the 1500s. English kings had claimed the feudal lordship over Ireland ever since the Norman conquest of Ireland in the 1100s. But it was not until the reign of Henry VIII in the 1530s and 1540s that English monarchs actually came to rule Ireland politically. They established political control over Ireland largely to ensure that no foreign or domestic enemy could use Ireland as a backdoor to invade England. But it's one thing to rule a country politically. It's another thing to own it economically. Henry VIII's daughter Elizabeth fought a long war against Spain, the War of the Spanish Armada, in which the Spanish actually did land an army in Ireland to aid Irish rebels against Elizabeth. She felt it necessary to bring over English settlers to take land from the Irish and farm it, thus securing the back door. This process of English and later Scottish settlement continued all through the 1600s and set the pattern for British land seizures from Native Americans in Virginia and New England. One similarity between British land seizures in Ireland and the British land seizures in North America was a sense of cultural superiority. Anglo-Saxon England and Celtic Ireland had different languages, different legal systems, different lifestyles. So English contempt for the Celtic culture provided a convenient justification for taking Irish land, even as contempt for the Pequots justified taking their land. These barbarians were not making good use of it. A major difference in motive, however, was in religion. England and Scotland became Protestant in the 16th century, but Ireland remained Roman Catholic. While the English settlers in North America saw the Pequots and Narragansetts simply as heathens, the English in Ireland saw the native Irish as devotees of an evil enemy religion with whom they were at war. The religious wars of the 16th and 17th centuries, which pitted Protestant England, Sweden, and the Netherlands against the mighty Spanish Empire and the Austrian Habsburg Empire, were marked by massacres, tortures, burning at the stake, and enduring hatreds. For the Protestant English, Catholics were represented by, let's see if I get this thing right, excuse me just a minute. This is an English merchant being burned alive in Portugal. This is what Roman Catholicism meant to the 16th century English, especially after the reign of Mary Tudor, who did away with about 400 English Protestants during her very short reign. They were also, of course, of the wrong religion. This is an era in which to be of the wrong religion means you're going to a literal fiery hell, where torches are applied to every inch of your flesh forever. So Catholics are of the wrong religion. This is a Protestant cartoon mocking the whole Catholic concept of transubstantiation. This is the Protestant view of how simplistic Catholics see the real presence of Christ's body. The Virgin Mary tosses the baby into a machine, out he comes as wafers. Again, this is, but again, when you believe that Catholics are just wrong and anybody who tries to make you into a Catholic is sending you to hell, there just ain't no punishment too great for that kind of person. Because Spain represented international Catholicism, to be Catholic in English eyes was to be an agent of a foreign enemy. If you were a Catholic Irishman, you could say, hey, I don't speak Spanish. I've never been to Spain. I hate paella. Nope, sorry. You are Catholic, therefore you are an agent of the Spanish. So we have this kind of picture. This is a tripartite picture. Over there on the left, you see the Spanish Armada being scattered by heavenly winds. The English, of course, defeat the Spanish Armada and save themselves from invasion. But in the middle there, you see all of England's enemies. Over there at the left-hand side of the table is the Pope. Over on the right hand, the head of the Jesuit order. You've got the King of Spain. And presiding over the whole thing, old Satan himself. This is, again, you have to sort of understand what this means for the English and their attitudes toward the Irish Catholics. Over there on the far right, that's representative of a plot by English Catholic plotters to blow up both houses of Parliament with the king in them. This was Guy Fawkes. You may have heard of Guy Fawkes Day. It's November the 5th. And we see, therefore, the Catholics being seen not just as burners and torturers, not just as agents of a foreign enemy, but as advocates of tyranny, people who want to destroy Englishmen' rights and liberties. Well, let's fast forward to the 1660s, and we've got now the great Catholic enemy of England is France, the France of Louis XIV. And so here we have this cartoon of Louis XIV in the stocks with the Pope, and the devil is knocking their heads together. What is it? The devil speaks. How is it, friend Louis, brother Pope? What cheer? Both drunk with blood. I'm glad to see you here. The fistula and anno, nay, the pox, and purgatory's feigned bolts and locks are all but baubles to infernal stocks, and then their heads he knocks. The point is that if you look at what this document, you look at the top of this document, you can see that it's a playing card. It's 5 of spades. When you've got so innocuous a document as a playing card flashing this kind of anti-Catholic feeling, you really see how much it pervades English society. Even if we go to the Enlightenment, when religious toleration is really the word of the day, this is up in the 1700s. We see French soldiers going off to attack England, and they're being accompanied by a priest who's rejoicing and slavering over his wagon load full of torture instruments. So this is, again, you have to understand this attitude. I know it can be kind of difficult. When I first showed that slide of Satan presiding over, joining together with a pope to a group of theater students about 30 years ago at Fairfield, they were shocked. How could anybody how can anybody assume that the pope is associated with the devil? But that's the English Protestant view. So, by the end of the 17th century, after a series of Irish rebellions and wars, Protestant Englishmen had taken over not just the political control of Ireland, but a large percentage of Irish land. Penal laws passed in the 1690s and early 1700s completed the process, whereby Catholic Irish land passed to the English Protestant settlers, so that by 1800, only 5% of Ireland's arable land was in Catholic hands. This didn't mean that the Catholic Irish were driven out of Ireland. It simply meant that now, from a social standpoint, the upper classes, the gentry, the nobility, who owned the land, were nearly all Protestants, descended from English settlers. The Catholics were the tenant farmers, the laborers, the vagrants, who made up the lower classes. Many a Catholic tenant farmer was tilling land that his ancestors had owned. For the English-descended landowners in the early 1800s, therefore, the Catholic Irish were not just of the wrong religion, not just of an inferior culture, they were socially lower class, with all the characteristics associated with the lower classes, the poverty, the lack of education, dirty, sexually promiscuous, and so on. This social and cultural contempt had a political element to it. During the wars of the French Revolution, a number of Irishmen revolted against England in 1798. They were called the Society of the United Irishmen, and they were portrayed by British cartoonists as these plunderers and murderers. The French Revolution, of course, as you probably know, scared the living daylights out of every crowned head in Europe and all the aristocracy and all the upper classes, because, of course, they wanted to overturn everything that was stable about a hierarchical society. Liberté, égalité, fraternité, oh la mort. So we see the English portraying the French Revolution as this horrible event. Good old Britannia is confronted by this horrible French hag. And we also, of course, see the cartoon of the French Revolution consuming its own children. Am I? Sorry, just a minute here. That's better. Note that French cap of liberty. I wish it were in color. It would be a red French cap of liberty. But if we go on to the 1820s, when Daniel O'Connell was pushing for what we call Catholic emancipation, the granting of Catholics the right to serve in Parliament, we see, again, the English portraying him. This is, the Catholic Association, or Paddy coming it strong. And we can see that you've got this horrible, ugly-looking priest with a cross. But look what's on top of the cross. A red French cap of liberty. Catholicism equals rebellion. Catholicism equals French revolutionary chaos. Well, okay, this cultural, social, religious division between the Protestant, English-descended landholders and the Irish Catholic tenants meant that the landholders did not have a strong interest in living on the land amongst their tenants, as English landlords did, or carrying out agricultural improvements on their tenants' land, as the English landlords did. A middleman system developed in Ireland in which the landlord's agent collected the rent while the landlord was off having a good time in Dublin or London. This absentee landlord cared for nothing but receiving his rent money. So, no agricultural revolution in Ireland. Many of these Protestant landlords were careless and got into debt. Meanwhile, the wretched poverty of the Irish tenants created a population boom, with nothing but family relationships to make life worth living, and the ability to raise many children on potatoes. The Irish tenantry grew in numbers so that by 1845, Ireland's population was approximately 8.2 million. Today, it's only about 5.3 million. Over 1/4 of that number, 8.2 million, were dependent on the potato. So when the potato crop failed 3 years in a row, starvation became widespread, with typhus, cholera, other diseases running rampant. The British government saw what was happening and sent over some food, but not nearly enough to prevent the disaster. Great Britain was the wealthiest nation on earth in 1845, and Ireland was part of Great Britain. How could any government allow such a thing to happen? Well, part of the answer lies in British ignorance of Irish conditions. Urban, industrializing Britain was a very different place from the largely rural, agricultural Ireland. But the British ministers in London could not see this. They assumed that solutions that worked in Britain would work in Ireland. Thus, they applied laissez-faire theory to the famine. You know how laissez-faire works. Whenever there's a scarcity of any commodity, so the theory goes, the price of that commodity goes up. This provides an incentive for suppliers to take advantage of the high prices, produce more of that commodity, in this case food, and to ship it to the consumer. If your country has an efficient transportation system and a smoothly working money economy, and above all, if the consumer has money to pay for the food, the theory works. However, none of these conditions applied to the 2 million Irish people who were in danger. Most of them were in the west of Ireland, where roads were poor or non-existent, and they did not have any money to pay for the food. So, no incentive for a wheat farmer in France or Illinois to ship grain over to Ireland. And as a matter of fact, food was actually shipped out of Ireland during the worst years of the famine to foreign customers who could pay for it. This is a cartoon. I'm sorry, no, beg your pardon. I should also, hang on, let me just keep on going here. Oops, what did I do? Yeah, here we go. There we go. This is a cartoon of, actually it's criticizing British policy during the famine. You can see that the poor Irish down there in the lower left-hand corner are saying, "'Tis starving we are," and they're being held off from the food, which is being loaded aboard a ship called the Orange Man, okay, and the big fat British shipmaster is saying, "Stand off, you spalpeens! Can't we get 50% more at foreign markets? Off, you unreasonable brutes! Do you expect his lordship in London to give up his champagne and Burgundy to please ye?" So there were a number of people who did criticize British policy, but not enough of them to change the British So blind were they to Irish conditions, and so bound were they to laissez-faire dogma. The British official in charge of the famine relief, Sir Charles Trevelyan, stated in a letter, "But I need not remind your lordship that the ability even of the most powerful government is extremely limited in dealing with a social evil of this description. It forms no part of the functions of government to provide supplies of food or to increase the productive powers of the land. In the great institution of the business of society, it falls to the share of government to protect the merchant and the agriculturalist in the free exercise of their respective employments, but not itself to carry on those employments." Trevelyan, like many other British officials, believed that because the Protestant landlords had helped cause this calamity, they, not the British taxpayer, should foot the bill for solving it, and many British taxpayers agreed. Let me see if I can't get another. There we go. The English laborer's burden. You can see the poor English farmer and the fat, ugly Irishman on top of him. One thing I didn't mention, talking about the political aspects and the social aspects, was that there's also a racial component. Let me go back to this English view of the Irish. This is called Irish bog trotters. If you look at that woman over there on the right-hand side, you can see a distinct gorilla-like face. We see this in a lot of other portrayals of the Irish. When they do get over to America, they are seen as a separate, a different race. Okay, let me go on then. Excuse me just a minute. And this is a criticism of the British, but it didn't affect the British policy. Many of the landlords were in debt and could not afford the necessary expenditure. But more important, maybe, was that this was a biological disaster of unprecedented proportions, and the British officials simply did not have the imagination or foresight to realize that. But that's only one explanation. That's only one part of it. The cultural, social, political contempt that I mentioned earlier played a big part in British reluctance to send more aid. Trevelyan also stated, "The real evil with which we have to contend is not the physical evil of the famine, but the moral evil of the selfish, perverse, and turbulent character of the people." There was a sense that the Irish were simply beyond help. They were such primitives that nothing Britain could do would be of any use. At the very least, the Irish recipients of aid should be made to work for their food. So the British government instituted road building projects to employ people who were barely able to walk, let alone haul stones and timbers, so weak were they from lack of food. These British beliefs were reinforced by a foolish rebellion raised in 1848 by a group called Young Ireland. Well-educated, middle-class Irish men never missed a meal, Protestant as well as Catholic, who wanted to see an independent Ireland. The rebellion was a farce, and it was easily crushed, but it convinced many British people that the Irish would only bite the hand that fed them. We see this expressed in, there we go, the height of impudence. Over there on the left is John Bull representing England, and over there on the right is an Irishman. Again, you look at that gorilla-like face. The height of impudence. Irishman to John Bull. "Spare a trifle, Your Honor, for a poor Irishman to buy a bit of a blunderbuss with." Blunderbuss, of course, is a crude shotgun. So it's no surprise to see one of the British government's top economic advisors, one Nassau Sr., lamenting that in 1848 only 1 million would die from famine causes, and that was not sufficient to solve the Irish surplus population problem. As the famine progressed, many landlords, facing economic hardship, chose to evict Irish tenants from their land and convert from arable tillage to pasture. Over 100,000 Irish tenants were thrown out of their homes. And here's where we see, let me go back there a little bit to where we had that. Yeah, there we are. This is an Irish family, just their home has just been destroyed, and all they've got is their furniture sitting out there, and the winter coming on. So we have this. Even tenants who occupied larger tracts of land and who could grow grain were in danger of eviction thanks to the rack-renting landlords. Because the landlord and tenant arrangement was often oral and not written, a landlord could raise the rent as much as he liked, and the tenant had no recourse. Tenants who depended on potatoes for their food and sold the grain to pay the rent had an unenviable choice when the potatoes failed: sell the grain and starve, or eat the grain, be evicted, and starve. The Great Hunger did not end at one specific point, but after 1852, life improved for those Irish who had survived. Land holdings became larger and farming marginally more efficient, partly because the Malthusian horror that Nassau Senior welcomed had actually done its work. A land league was formed under the able leadership of Charles Stewart Parnell to push for improved land rights, and eventually in 1881, the British Parliament passed a Land Act that gave Irish tenant farmers some security against eviction and rent raising. The British government eventually reversed the 16th and 17th century land seizures by lending money to thousands of Irish tenant farmers at low interest rates and long terms so that they could purchase their holdings from their landlords. The Great Hunger also helped spur the push for Irish Home Rule, that is, the granting to Ireland of its own parliament, as was being done for Canada, New Zealand, and Australia. What happened to the Irish who made it over to Boston and New York? This flood of wretchedly poor people was the first ethnic group to arrive in large numbers who were not Protestant or culturally Anglo-American. Let's see here. There we go. That's the American view of the Irish sending their poor, wretched, starving people over to America. And there's also, again, remember, this is largely a Protestant America. So what you've got is this view of Catholic immigrants. These horrible alligators are crawling ashore, endangering the good Protestant American youth. And of course, if you look really closely, you can see those aren't really alligators at all. They are Roman Catholic bishops. Their mitres are forming the jaws of the alligators. So we have this very, very anti-Irish feeling. And let me see here. Let me go back a little bit. Yes. The Irish were often taken advantage of when they landed on the docks. They had a completely new environment. They were put into debt by unscrupulous owners of boarding houses and businesses. They became the poor underclass, looked down upon by the Anglo culture, put to work in the lowest, dirtiest jobs, building the roads, working in steel mills, working as servants. Nativist groups like the Know Nothing Party terrorized and killed Irish immigrants. Famine Irish arriving in America had few skills other than to plant, harvest, and boil potatoes. So most of them did not head west for new lands, but stayed in the cities. They were seen by Anglo-Americans as a separate race and were discriminated against accordingly. In the 1840s and 1850s, they competed with freed African Americans for jobs. The phrase, "no Irish need apply," was common, and Brigid, the ignorant parlor maid, a familiar stereotype. During the American Civil War, thousands of Irish immigrant men served in the armies, most of them in the Union armies, and fought and died in the killing fields of Manassas, Fredericksburg, and Shiloh, without a sense of what they were fighting for. After the draft was imposed by Lincoln's government, many a rich northern family paid for a poor Irish immigrant to take their son's place so that the son could go to Harvard or Yale and stay out of the fighting. But the Irish in America were a strong people. They took to urban politics with great energy. City politics during the later 19th century, as we all know, was terribly corrupt. Boss Tweed, Tammany Hall, the idea of voting early and often violent brawls to gain possession of the ballot boxes. The Irish Americans became very good at this rough and tumble urban politics, partly because of their number. At one point, every third person in New York City had been born in Ireland. And you can see how, again, the Irish are perceived by Anglo-America as the corrupting American politics. Never mind the fact that plenty of other non-Irish people were equally corrupt. But this is the Irishman. He's slicing open the Democratic Party, and there is this horrible-looking priest. Again, anti-Catholic bigotry was not confined to Britain. It was alive and well in the United States. The Irish immigration to the United States continued through the 19th and 20th centuries. The first person to walk down the gangplank at Ellis Island in 1892 was Annie Moore, a teenage girl from Ireland. Anglo-Protestant America continued to look down upon them, but came to respect or even fear them as a political force. Excuse me just a minute here. There we go. Got it. American view of the Catholic Church in the USA, you can see this, the Pope is manipulating both the Republican and Democratic parties. Shall he be allowed to rule America? Again, this is part of this bias. So, to conclude, the Great Hunger lives on in Irish and American memory. In his best-selling memoir, Angela's Ashes, the Irish writer Frank McCourt writes of people in 1930s Limerick in Ireland, speaking resentfully of the superism, to refer to the practice of some Protestant missionary groups offering soup during the famine to starving Irish Catholics on condition that they convert to Protestantism. More recently, in 1997, the 150th anniversary of the worst year of the famine, the British Prime Minister Tony Blair expressed regret over the British government's failure to adequately assist the famine victims. But he stopped short of making a full apology. He was criticized by some Irish nationalists for not going far enough, and by Ulster Protestant Unionists for going too far with what they called ill-conceived statements. At Fairfield University in the later 1980s, it's time during the Troubles in Northern Ireland, our student Irish American Club hosted a speech by a former Connecticut State Assemblyman on the conditions in Northern Ireland, with question and answer afterwards. The speaker was asked whether he could justify the IRA killings that were currently happening in Belfast and Derry. He replied, "Well, you have to go back to the Irish famine of the 1840s. I practically fell out of my chair. So the scars are still with us. The Irish have never forgotten the sight of men, women, and children, their mouths green from eating grass, scrabbling helplessly to get at wagon loads full of food that were rumbling along Irish roads to take ship for overseas markets. But when I heard that assemblyman bring out the famine as part of a justification, or at least explanation, for the violence in Northern Ireland, I wanted to say, for God's sake, put the past behind you. Learn from the past, but don't let it control you." As we look at the expressive and powerful works of art in this exhibit, let us learn without resentment how to prevent such calamities in the future. Thank you. If there are any questions, I think we've got microphones. This is being recorded, so if you want your question to be recorded, and you need to go to the microphones. I think there's one there. Do I see another one? Yeah, okay. So are there any questions? I often ask this of students, and then I start picking on people. What do you think? What do you think?
I have a question about why we don't hear more about this hunger and this time period. We were in Ireland about 4 or 5 years ago, and we're talking to Irish people there, and they were like, "We don't care, it was a long time ago." But it was such a horrible, difficult thing. So many people died, so many people had to leave. Where is the locus of information about it, and we just don't hear a lot about it, I guess, and I'm wondering if you have any comments about that.
I've heard a number of explanations. One is a psychological one. So terrible was it, so awful that people just don't want to think about it anymore. They don't want to have anything to do with it because it just was so awful a thing to have happen. It becomes an issue. We've got, I think there was a Massachusetts individual in Boston or someplace wanting to term the Great Hunger the Irish Holocaust. Again, that opened up a real can of worms because, are you thinking, were the British deliberately trying to kill these people the way the Nazis were deliberately trying to kill Jews and Gypsies and other people? Well, it became a real issue. But in Ireland itself, I'm not so sure. I just don't know. I suspect that they probably, in Irish schools, that probably teach it. But I don't know that it's a big issue. Ever since the Celtic Tiger, ever since the 1990s, we see a tremendous change in Irish attitudes. I'm 73 years old. Irish people my age still continue to talk about Ireland in terms of Britain. We are England's victim. We are England's partner. We are England's this. We're England's that. But with the tremendous opening up of the Irish economy to the European economic community, we're seeing young people in pubs in Dublin talking in the same way that young people talk in Paris or Berlin. They're not worried. There's no occasion for resentment anymore. In other words, they're thinking of themselves more as Europeans. But it is a good question. I don't know just exactly how much it is talked about. We have this museum, of course, and so obviously this is an opportunity for more people to learn about it. Yeah.
When President Kennedy was elected, do you think that was a culmination of Irish power, political power in the United States, that finally the first Catholic president was elected? Or could you comment on his? There was a lot of anti-papist sentiment at that time regarding his nomination.
No, I don't think it was because the Irish Americans were so powerful. I think it's because eventually the United States became more of a secular society. Al Smith lost to Herbert Hoover in 1928 to a great extent because he was Catholic. So it had an impact upon that election. But Kennedy actually very, very smoothly, I'm not sure what he actually said, but he brilliantly put to rest any fears that the American presidency would be controlled by the papacy. He was much more effective in doing that. So I think the great mass of American people were perfectly okay with him at that point, simply because we had become a more secular society, less religiously oriented. Back in the 1920s, you had the John Scopes trial. People still believed in, that evolution was wrong. So I think we changed a lot, especially after the war. Yeah.
Hi, I'm going to try and attempt to answer the question that the gentleman asked before.
Please.
I was born in Galway, and we were taught the famine, but I think it was a very sterilised view. And I believe my opinion of that is that they did not want to jeopardise the peace process in the north of Ireland. And in fact, today, April the 10th I think it's the 1998, April the 10th was when the Good Friday Agreement was signed. So we were coming up on the 150th anniversary of the famine when that happened. So it became a very, very delicate topic to talk about. And of course, the Irish are known for say nothing. People survived. Some people did very, very well during the famine. Some people did not. And that also ties into why there's a little bit of silence. But I think we're ready to talk about it now.
Oh, yeah, it's true. Yes, I remember reading an article about that, and the Ulster Unionists who criticized Blair for even talking about it just said, it won't do any good. You could apologize all you like. It would just mean to more demands from the Southern Catholic Irish. They're constantly a sense of victimhood, and they can't ever get out of that. That was their answer. But it is an interesting question. Yeah. You go to our chapel, and you walk in the main gate, the main entrance, and off to your right there's a small plaque saying, it was put up there in 1997. This is dedicated to all those millions who died simply because they were Irish and Catholic. A little bit of generalization, I would have to say. because I think there's a lot more complexity to it, but you can see that plaque. I'm sorry, I can't see. Everybody okay?
May I speak from here?
Please.
12% died because of the famine. Math is not good, so 70% did survive. And how do they survive?
Well, again, we're talking about a large Irish populace, but there were many Irish in the eastern cities, in Wexford, Waterford, Dublin, up in Ulster, who were prosperous farmers. They weren't totally dependent on the potato. We're talking about between, I think, 2 and 3 million who depended largely on the potato. The other Irish did not. You had fairly prosperous farmers. You had tradesmen. You had merchants. It wasn't a completely rural society. So you did have that diverse population. But to me, over a quarter of a population being dependent on one food source only is quite unusual. Yeah. Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry. Could you go to the microphone? They want to record this, so they want to get the question on record. I guess that's the situation.
I'm curious about today, how much does Catholicism impact the Irish culture and political scene in Ireland? And in what ways does it influence those?
It influences much, much less than it did 30 years ago. The recent scandals that have hit the Catholic Church, the discovery of these horrible industrial schools where the Christian brothers and orders of nuns brutally abused children. When you see these scandals breaking out about pedophile priests, the link between Irish nationalism and Roman Catholicism was slowly broken, stripped of everything they had by the early 1700s, but their God and their church. The Irish people looked to Catholicism as their only solace. So it became the most incredible binding connection. Irish nationalism, Roman Catholicism. And it's taken decades of scandal after scandal after scandal to convince a number of Irish politicians, gee whiz, maybe the bishop is lying. Maybe Father isn't a good man. Maybe Mother Superior has done some things wrong. I know it's hard to believe, but that's what happens. Also, of course, the Celtic Tiger. With the economy improving, Ireland became much more secular in its orientation. The same thing happened in Canada. It was called the Quiet Revolution. The Roman Catholic Church's grip on the Québécois was loosened that way. But it's taken a very long time. Today, I think we've got restrictions on abortion. We've got, but gay marriage is openly had. We've got contraception's okay. All these things were slowed down by the influence of the Roman Catholic Church. In 1951, the Irish Minister of Health wanted to put through the mother and child plan, whereby pregnant women would get free pre- and postnatal care. What's not to like about that? Well, the bishop said, no, this can't happen because when they're talking to their doctor, they might learn about birth control. And so the plan failed. But a lot of Irish people said, look, the bishops overstepped themselves. And 4 years later, the Irish government passed a similar bill, and it went through. So this is a very slow process. But I would have to say today, the Roman Catholic Church has only maybe about, 1/10 of the clout that it had 40 or 50 years ago. I'm guessing, that's a guess. Yeah. Anybody else? Sorry. These lights are in my eyes. I can't really see people. I think that's it. Well, thank you very much, people.